everybody. Welcome. I'm Andrea Thompson. I'm local program coordinator here at the Local Center, and we are a division of Dallas Arts and Culture. So taxpayer dollars at work this program. And I'm super excited to introduce Jennifer Cowley and Carl Sidle here to celebrate the unionization of the beautiful sculpture that Jennifer Cowley did that is in Twin Falls Park. That's at 6300 South Hope, in case anyone here hasn't gotten a chance. And I do not want to take up any more time. Just a brief introduction. Let us get into it. Thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Jennifer Monet Cowley, and I'm an artist, a designer, and also an independent curator, and I really appreciate you all being here. And this is my friend Carl Sidle, who is a photographer extraordinaire and also the best friend of the late, great Othello Beck Jr. And I want to extend an apology on behalf of May Beck, who is Othello's widow. She's not feeling well, so she will not be able to attend today. So just send a little prayer for her well-being, that she feels better. She's in pain, so that's the reason she wasn't able to make it. And she's nearly 80, so please show her some grace. But we're gonna go ahead and jump right into this. So I was approached to do this sculpture back in, I want to say 2019, with another artist. And things did not work out with that artist. After we actually got the project, we worked on it and got the project, and we're very excited because apparently, and I don't know how true this is, Jesse Hornbuckle, who is one of our Dallas County art commissioners through the Office of Dallas Culture, we were told that we made history as being the first Black women in over 30 years that had gotten a public art sculpture project, which is separate from like DART, because there are some projects with DART and some of the other entities throughout the city, but with the city of Dallas, I was told that it's possible that we made history with that, and also the fact that we were reflecting a Black family in a very positive light that had not been done before. So I don't know how true that is. Maybe Jesse can shed some light on that.
I definitely don't know all the history out there, so I don't want to speak on it. But let's just say, my knowledge.
Oh. Thank you. Thank you. But as I said, it was with another artist and it did not work out. So I had to start completely from scratch. And back in 2021, when my husband's sitting in the back there, and I was the curator over at the African American Museum, and our youngest daughter, Willow, had just graduated from high school. He said, babe, come on home and do your thing. Because I had been nurturing and felt like I've been breastfeeding kids for 10 years and pregnant for 10 years. But after the last one went off to school, he invited me to come back home and just do my thing. Therefore, I can focus on my art, curate when I want to, and do fashion design and all of those things. So I really appreciate the support of my husband in the back, Edlin Cowley, because he helps make me go. And he is my financial backer when I don't, when I have zero funds. I'm just being real, real talk. So we had just moved because my husband had just got reappointed to a different position. So we moved from one side of the Metroplex to the other side of the Metroplex. And when I was told by the city of Dallas that I need to start from scratch, I was like, okay, so this is in the middle of an entire move, house not unpacked, all my art supplies are completely packed up. And I was like, okay, not quite sure what I'm going to do because I can't do what me and the other artists did. So I'm going to have to do something completely different. And all my art stuff is completely packed up. So I went to bed. In the middle of the night, I woke up in the middle of the night because I was dreaming about this sculpture because my mind just does not rest. So in the middle of the night, I wake up out of my sleep with this vision on what this sculpture should look like. And remember, we had just moved. So in the moment, I'm thinking I'm writing on an envelope, and I could never find the envelope. I found it last night, and it was not an envelope. It was a book. Because I was scrolling through my phone trying to get the slideshow together and found that picture in my phone with a date that had like May 2021 in it. And I don't remember the exact date, but it was in May. And I was so excited. I went and showed my husband. He was in his office. And when I saw this, I'm like, I know exactly what book that was in. So I was excited that I found it. But this is the sketch that I presented to the city of Dallas the very next day. Yeah, I mean, it does not look like much, you know. And remember, this is like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's like dark. So I have my phone. The phone is my light, and I just have like a little purple pen, and I'm just doing a really rough sketch because, of course, when you're dreaming, if you don't document it, it leaves you. Sometimes we don't remember what we were dreaming about. We just know, oh, we know how we felt. We know that we were either terrified or scared or just loved or in a good place or something. And I knew that I had to document this moment like ASAP. So I grabbed whatever I could grab, and that's what I sketched. And with Othello's work, Othello wanted to humanize African Americans in his artwork because society oftentimes dehumanizes African Americans where we are less than human. So I wanted to make sure that I honored him by using references from his artwork as inspiration. So there's a tree. You can't tell it's a tree. I know it looks like something, but there's a tree in front of the center. And then there's like a father, and he's reading to his child. And then on the other side of the tree is a mother, and she's doing her daughter's hair, and the daughter is doing the hair of a doll. And they're sitting up on this wall because with one thing that I learned with public art sculptures, people be peopling. So safety first. So you have to deter people from wanting to climb because they're going to do what they want to do because you can't control adults and also some kids at times. So they're sitting high up on a wall, which I know it don't really make sense. But again, people be peopling. So I wanted to create something where this family is just sitting up there minding their own business and just chilling, just reflecting, just peaceful, because that's a way that a lot of times we're not portrayed. Because even if you watch the news with African Americans, they go straight to the most illiterate person that you can think of in the neighborhood and stick a microphone in their face. And then they're supposed to represent all of us. And I'm very quick to say, that does not represent me. I'm very quick to say that. Even some of the Negro leaders, I'm very quick to say, they don't represent me. And I say that all the time. That don't represent me. I can speak for myself, but that don't represent me. So with that, that's what I presented to the city, and I was very nervous. And when I presented to Drema and Kay Cowley, who was the previous director over the Office of Cultural Affairs, and I was so nervous because I'm like, they're not going to understand what I'm talking about. I'm like, that's a hot ass mess. But we were on video on Teams, and they're like, no, I love it. I get it. I completely understand where you're coming from. And I was like, whew, you know. So with that, the next thing I had to do was go to Cattle Lake. Because I'm like, I cannot channel this without going to the place that Othello found so much solace. with Carl by his side. So immediately in July, just not thinking, well, we were thinking, because we were thinking about food afterwards also. But my husband and I drove to Cattle Lake. We got there probably around 1. We did a boat tour. Not a good idea to do a boat tour on Cattle Lake in Texas in July at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It was hot. And it was 2 hours on a boat in the heat with no shade. But it was so peaceful, so beautiful, just gorgeous, just gorgeous. And I took tons and tons and tons of pictures. And when I was taking the pictures, I noticed there were bald cypress trees. Before I went to the lake, I was trying to reenact what I wanted to create. And my husband and I, before we went to the lake, we went to a tree farm over off of 121 in Frisco and found this bald cypress tree. And I'm like, I am quite sure those trees don't look like that at Cattle Lake. Yeah, and they don't. But I took a picture of the tree and I was like, we're going to go with this. And then we called some family friends, and they had 2 young kids, and I met them over at Fair Park and put them on a wall because I had to use the wall that was already existing that we had already designed because the city was like, we ain't spending more money on this wall. So the wall, you have to figure out something with the wall. So with these small kids, their kids were like 3 and 1, okay? And if anyone who has little bitty kids, 1-year-olds and 3-year-olds have a mind of their own, which means they don't sit still. They're looking around, legs and limbs are flying everywhere. So this is the family, one of the families, the first family that I photographed, and just a prototype of the book and kind of a prototype of what I wanted to do. And as you can see, those kids are not sitting still. And I have their faces blurred because of what I'm getting ready to say next, because I don't want to body shame anyone. I presented this to the city of Dallas. And also, this is the flip side of it. Like the back side. So when I sent that over to the city of Dallas, someone said, actually it was Jesse. Jesse pulled me aside. He actually called me after our Zoom meeting, and he said, Jennifer, because he's a photographer. I am not a photographer, but I use photography as a medium, so I'm a photographer now. So I'm going to claim that. I'm a photographer now because I use it on this particular project. But he said, you have to really think about space in negative space. And how, especially if you're going to use silhouette on the back side, how are you going to be able to tell what's what? So he pointed out to me, like with the male figure who's reading to his son, he said, that man looks like he's pregnant. And he said, I don't know what that is in front of him. And then the woman said, she kind of looked like she may have somebody laying in her lap, but she looked like she's pregnant too. So I'm like, okay. And then he said, I suggest you use slimmer models, And it's not the body shame the family that I selected, but I understood where he was coming from, because with a sculpture, you want to be able to convey what's on the front and also on the back, because it's a sculpture that is front and back, although it's in silhouette on the back, but you still want to be able to see exactly what was on the front that relates to what's on the back, if that makes sense. Y'all following me? All right, so we move on to the next slide. So with that same summer, some friends of mine that own a art gallery, pencil and paper gallery, Emmanuel and Valerie Gillespie. Valerie Gillespie they're both artists, and she's the owner of the gallery, husband and wife. And they were having an art show with the artwork of kids of artists. So, which I thought was genius because all the kids that were in the show were the children of artists who parents are making a living from their art. So their children, Bailey and Riley Jr., Riley III, were in the show. So on the drive to the gallery, I came up with this brilliant idea. And I was like, oh, I'll ask Riley if they would love to be models in the sculpture because of the fact that I'm all about symbolism. So with the symbolism, Riley is a thriving young artist. Othello was once a thriving young artist with a wife and 2 kids, with a son and a daughter. And I'm like, this will be perfect if they say yes. If they say yes, it will be perfect. So when I stepped up to Riley as soon as I arrived, he said, I'm game, but you need to ask the boss, which is Kelsey. Kelsey is the boss. If y'all know Riley and Kelsey, Kelsey is the boss. So I asked Kelsey, and she said, of course. So we met up over at UTD, because of course we're living in Richardson now. And met up over at UTD, and I started photographing them. And when I started photographing them, I was looking at the photos. I was like, okay. And I was taking into consideration what Jesse had told me prior, because I was just snapping photos, and I was looking at the space and flipping it over and all of that, and it did not work. So I photographed them again. So I had them come back like maybe a month later or 2 weeks later, and I said, let's go to this park, this school right around the corner from my house, and we can try it there. And that's where the magic happened. So I'm going to go through these slides, and I'm not going to flip all of them around. I'm going to stop on the one that we end up using. But I took all these photos of them until I got the right one, which was that one. And I love this one because Kelsey doesn't have the scarf around her neck. And you see I paint the book. So this is one of Othello's quotes that says, teach us and we will not forget you. That's a quote that's in one of his paintings. And then I put his name at the bottom. I painted the book, the cover of the book, and I did the lettering and all of that because I wanted his quote to be like the title of a book that he's reading to his son. And his son is just being a typical boy. He's just being a boy, and the mom and me way back would have been like, sit still, be still, don't be looking like that. Why you got that goofy look on your face? But it works because he's playing. He's just being a kid. He's being a boy. And then Kelsey's doing her daughter Bailey's hair, and Bailey's doing her little beloved doll's hair. And they're just, I remember, like, in the painting from Othello's, when they're doing hair, I remember my mom is sitting here, and I remember back when just being a little girl, I would sit between my mom's legs and just her plaiting my hair. I wore plaits, y'all. I didn't wear ponytails. My mother had me in plaits. In plaits. And when I was in junior high school, it was cornrows. So like every month, I would get a new set of cornrows complete with beads. So when I go and start jumping up and down, do a jumping jacks and jam, the beads start flying. So I'm chasing the beads around the gym floor, or she'll do that beehive with that one braid on top. That's the one that I did not like. Because there were people that would trace my hair, doing that. With that one plait, and then they stick the plait straight up. Yeah. But yeah. So that reminded me of that, and then also our dad who used to read to us and read us Harry the Dirty Dog. So all of this brought back memories for me from my childhood. And even with my kids and me doing my daughters, my 2 girls' hair, and even my son's hair, because at one point he had locks and he has a lot of hair, and just them being kids. So with this photograph, what I did not know with a public art sculpture, there are so many different factors that go into it. And you have to think about safety, you have to think about materials and how long it's going to last and all of that. And end up going with porcelain enamel. And the unfortunate thing with porcelain enamel, not the unfortunate thing with porcelain enamel, the company, there's not one located in Texas. So I had to go all the way to California. Yeah, there aren't that many in the nation that does this process. And Vicki Meek, who is a dear friend, was the one who recommended going with porcelain enamel, because what I did not want to do is be up in a park painting on a sculpture and having to go and touch up paint every so often. I don't have time for that. So my motto is to work smarter, not harder. And it was more important for me to make sure that it was made from materials that were going to withstand the test of time, because also it would have been my reputation on the line, also the city's reputation on the line, and I didn't want to disappoint either one of us. So this porcelain enamel with the use of photography with a glass overlay that was baked on. So it will withstand Texas heat, the rain, all of that. And then if a tornado comes through and takes it away, I can call it the fabricator and they can build another one that looks just like it because they have it all on file. So that was a win-win for me, because what I did not want to do is have to start from scratch and be up in the park hand painting something just for the satisfaction of saying, oh, I painted this. That was not important to me, because I know that I designed it, so that was enough. So, yes. So that is, let's see. So this is the flip side of it, because I had to take out my X-Acto knife. And the tree, as you can see, evolved. So it's not that little lollipop of a tree. It's more of a whimsical of a fall cypress tree. If you go to Cattle Lake, you will see that a lot of the trees have like Spanish moss hanging from it. So some of that drooping is somewhat reminiscent of the Spanish moss that is dripping from the tree or hanging from the tree. And as you can see there's space, so you can clearly see what's going on, opposed to the preliminary with the other family. You can see the book, you can see the kid with the ball, you can see the father reading, you can see a figure doing hair, and you can see a child with a doll doing hair. You can see that things are pretty much clear as to the other one. Let's see. And this is them up on the wall. So I had to place them on a little makeshift wall with the measurement. Because the other thing, this is where I have an architectural background, because I was in architecture school for 3.5 years. So this is when that came into play, because I got to take out my architectural scale and my engineering scale and all of that, and had to do everything to scale. So the wall is actually 5 feet tall and it's 7 feet wide. So everything had to be a certain size because all of that factors into cost, because there was a certain budget for this entire project. The project was $81,500. That was actually before COVID, okay? So before COVID, it was $81,500, okay? No one predicted COVID. We didn't see it coming. So of course, when COVID hit, the price of everything went up, especially rebar. I didn't know what rebar was until I had to try to locate it. And it's that metal that goes inside of concrete. When you're pouring like a sidewalk, that metal frame, that is rebar. And supposedly the rebar went up. So of course, with all the price of the materials going up, there had to be an increase in budget, whether they wanted it to or not. All right, so with this tree, when you're working on a public art project, you have to think of safety. And it's not just you designing it, you're working with an engineer as well, because I'm not an engineer. So I can't just, you saw the first tree, it was just filled in all black, okay? They said, well, you have to think about velocity with wind and all of that. So it has to have a place where the air and wind can pass through. So I made the tree with more spaces. And they said, well, the spaces are too big. What if someone does put their kid up there, or even if it's a grown person, what if they decide to stick their head in there and get stuck? And I'm like, okay, I never thought about that. Thought about that. So I'm like, who does that? But surprisingly, people do. People be people, and people do that kind of thing. So I had to take that into consideration. So the red spots, or where they were saying those spaces, is kind of like dead space. So those spaces were to be filled in. But also with that, they were saying the spaces were still too big. So with this drawing, this is the engineer drawing, where you can see where they filled in more of the spaces where they're a little smaller, just a little bit. But it also went through another revision, because I think it was the size of a tennis ball. I think it's a tennis ball. You cannot have spaces with openings that are larger than a tennis ball, because someone's head can get stuck. Yeah, someone's head can get stuck in there. Yeah, you have to think of the worst case scenario, because the unfortunate thing, there are so many opportunists out there that are looking at ways to make money, even if it puts them in harm's way. They will take the risk to get a little bit of dough. I'm just saying. So those were things that really had to take into consideration. But this is the back where I wanted to put the quote on the back, and it says, "We live in a dehumanized society. To combat this dehumanization, I tried to bring out human values in my art." That's a quote that I found from an article from an interview that our fellow did back in the early 70s. And when I read that article back in 2018, I'm like, this has to be on the sculpture, because this will be the driving force behind the meaning of the sculpture for it all to make sense. In the middle of working on the sculpture, I was also asked by Jesse to curate a exhibition at the same time that I happened to have a solo show up at Dacia Board Gallery early last year. I'm so sorry. I'm just gonna pause it. So, all right. So I just happened to have a solo show happening at the same time, and I was curating a retrospect on Othello's work. And Othello had never had a solo museum exhibition here in Dallas, which is a shame, because it should have happened when he was still living at the museum. I do remember back in December of 2004 going to the DMA and seeing his work of art that was part of the Grant Hill collection. I think the piece was Confrontation. I remember seeing that particular piece in that exhibition, and I thought it was sad that he wasn't alive to see it, because he had died, the month before?
Right.
Yeah, and I thought it was a shame that he wasn't here to see it. But this is one of his paintings that heavily inspired. This piece is called Braiding Session, and this is one of the pieces of art that I used as inspiration for the sculpture, where you have these generations of women that are doing hair, and you have the baby on the side, and you have the little girl with her doll, and it's called Braiding Session. They're just braiding hair. Because a lot of us, we grew up with our moms or the auntie down the street or the grandmother doing our hair. Whether it's with the hot comb or the jackleg relaxer or whatever, or the person who can braid real good, they're the ones that would do your hair. So this piece is called Braiding Session. And this is one of the pieces that I selected to be viewed at the African American Museum, to be in the retrospect in honor of Othello. This is just a little flyer for the exhibition that happened back in May of last year. That's me and Carl at the Artist Talk, and that's me and May Beck, who is Othello's widow, at the and this is May and Carl. They're walking through the gallery at the African American Museum. I'm sorry, y'all. And this is when May first saw her husband's work at the museum before she walked into the gallery. And she's with one of her friends, and she's reading the write-up that I wrote for the exhibition. Those are all the sponsors for the exhibition that was at the African American Museum. The photograph at the top is a photograph of Othello that Carl actually took. And okay, in this, I need to pause it here. All right, so this is the piece. This is a self-portrait of Othello when he was 25 years old. This is the first piece you would see when you walk into the gallery at the African American Museum. And this piece was so interesting because I did not know that this piece even existed. Me and Jesse were at the gallery, at May's gallery, at Othello's gallery, and he trusted us enough. It took a minute, but we gained her trust where she let us into the back room, which is where the goal was, where she pulled out this painting of Othello when he was 25, this self-portrait. And I told her, I said, May, I said, this has to be in the show. And she's like, I don't know. And it's like, no. I said, I need to have this. And she said, you sure? I'm like, yes. I was like, I have to have it in the show. And then the other piece that was amazing was this piece. This is a portrait that he did of her when she was pregnant with,
Hodari.
With Hodari, their son. And there was another portrait of her where she's just standing, where she's sitting very prim and proper. And she wanted me to use that one. And I was like, nope. I said, I want this one. Because this one shows her personality. It shows that spunk. It shows that little something, the attitude, that something. She just been herself, and she's like, I'm ready to have this baby. The baby's going, come on out, So I love this portrait of her that he did of her. And I put her on the opposite wall of him because she's his wife, and I felt that she needed to be present in the exhibition because she was his rib. And also, she also was the one who told Othello to start painting families, black families, and just black people. And because he was doing more of the activism, more controversial type activism type art, that like in the late 60s, early 70s. And she was the one that encouraged him to start painting us, like doing just normal everyday things like braiding hair, going to church, baptisms, reading the Bible, sewing, kids just playing, just minding their business on a makeshift go-kart, just doing different things. And she said that he told her that a lot of people were not, especially like black people, they weren't on for that. They were like, why are you painting this? You know, I don't know what they wanted him to paint, but they weren't happy about him painting us in just normal everyday life, you know, which is weird, you know, but he listened to his wife. I'll say that. That's made by her portrait. And I love this painting. This is called Reading Session. And this is a family. You have a family of 5, and you have a mother helping her son with homework, and you have a father reading to his kids. And I love this piece because you know that whole myth about black fathers not being present and not being in families? That might be true for some, but it's not true for all. You cannot paint a broad brush when it comes to black families, because for some of us, this is our reality. This is what we experience. For some of us, of course, there are some of us that did not have mothers and fathers in the family, but some of us, a lot of us did. And that needs to be reflected, because there's a whole narrative out there that black fathers are not present. And that was not my reality. That's not the reality of my kids. So I want to show in the sculpture that there are black fathers that are indeed present, that are part of their kids' lives. And I wanted to show that, and that education is important, because there's that other thing that's out there that we don't care about. Reading, if you want black people not to know something, put it in a book. So I want to make sure that show us reading and showing education, and that those are things that we actually care about, you know. So I wanted to do something that is true today, but just true all the time. And again, not for someone else to paint us with a broad brush and saying, this is what y'all are doing, this is what y'all doing, y'all not doing this. I'm like, no, we doing this. You know, this is what we're doing. We like to read, we like to study, we like to learn new things. You know, we like to hang out with our family. We love our families. You know, we love our mothers, we love our fathers, we love our kids. You know, so I want to make sure that that was reflected in the sculpture as well, just like Othello reflected this in his paintings way back when. This painting, I think, was created back in the late 90s or maybe early 2000s, before he passed away. And I'm just going to breeze through this. This is a copy of the Oak Cliff Advocate, because when they found out that I was doing the sculpture, they did a feature of me in Oak Cliff Advocate, and they did some of the portraits. That's a better picture of the portrait of Othello, and that one, I'm sorry, is lopsided. Get through. And again, that's a painting of a lady reading her Bible, little girl just reflecting by a tree, little go-kart with a bunch of kids on it, doesn't even look safe. This piece here, I can go back. Well, we can stop here. Okay, so this is one of the trees. This is a cypress tree that is at Cattle Lake. The photo, the slide before, the art piece before, is called Fisher Women, and it was women fishing on Cattle Lake. And this one is just a large cypress tree. That is still at Cattle Lake. You'll see it. If you ever do the boat tour at Cattle Lake, you'll see a bunch of trees just sticking out of this very shallow water with this Spanish moss just hanging from it. Because one thing after I got to know Othello, especially in the late 90s, very early 2000s, I had the pleasure of spending time with him and serving on AXO committee through the NAACP. and awarding students artwork. And unfortunately, it was right after his son was murdered, and he sought solace in nature and was painting more natural scenes, correct? Yeah, to take more solace in that because he was angry. He was angry, which I can understand that. And I remember doing the AXO committee over at Booker T. Washington, and the students there are very, very talented, but some of the artwork that was coming through there, they were painting skulls and crossbones and guns and things. We were having this in-depth conversation together, and my kids at the time were very little, and I was just thinking, what is going on with these kids? Why are they painting things that have to do with death, and destruction and violence, But they were very, very good drawings, but it's a subject matter. It's a subject matter I could not get with. And because of the subject matter, me personally, I had a hard time trying to send anyone to state with the subject matter. So I refused to give high marks for that because of the subject matter. Othello felt the same. So some of the students, we did pull them aside and say, why are you painting this? It's very well done, but I'm sorry, but because of the subject matter, what about spreading some joy? We can always use more joy on any and everything, and I can understand that if that's your situation, but at the time it was that was all we were seeing, So one of the young men who did one of the drawings of a gun said, well, I have something else. And he took us over to this sculpture that he created out of cast off metal, which was an elephant. And I was like, okay, you win. You're going to state with that because it was very well done and it was an elephant, And we could see the beauty and the joy in that was not a gun. And we were trying to explain to some of these students that there's more out there besides the limited thinking of skulls and crossbones and death and violence and guns and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, spread your wings. There are so many other things that you can create, besides this, So, but that's just a little tidbit of one of the conversations that I had with Othello regarding, after the death of his son and him retreating to nature, when he started painting more of the scenes from Cattle Lake and trees and just women fishing and just being at peace. And I'm going to speed it up a little bit, see if I can get to the actual photos of the actual sculpture. So that's another, so you see, teach us and we will not forget you. That's a direct thing from the sculpture. So this is the back side of the sculpture that's installed at the park. Now, I'm going to pause it right here because one thing I did not know, again, when you're doing a public art sculpture, okay, hopefully pause this time. I'm sorry, y'all, I'm not used to doing this, but I'm going to go ahead and rotate it. When I went to see my friend's sculpture, Andrew Scott, he did a sculpture on Anderson Bonner at Anderson Bonner Park, which is located not too far from Medical City Hospital. The funny thing is when I was trying to find this park, my GPS took me straight to Medical City. So what I did not know is that Anderson Bonner owned all of that land that the hospital sits on. A black man owned all of that land. And I'm like, ain't this something? When I pulled up at Medical City, I'm like, this is not the park, but this is very telling. Yeah, and with today's technology, that my GPS took me straight to Medical City. So I'm like, okay, I know the park's around here somewhere, so I continued to venture on down, I think it was Park Central, and finally found the park. So when I went to his sculpture dedication, and Andrew is a fabulous person, fabulous artist, fabulous professor over at UTD, which is my alma mater. But he fabricated his own sculpture because he's a sculptor, and he had his name signed on it. I did not think to put my name on the sculpture. And at this time I'm angry and I'm pulling away. And I'm like, I looked at Andrew like, I didn't put my name on my sculpture. He said, oh, I can help you do that. And so I'm like, okay, we can do this because it had not been dedicated yet. It was finished and it was up. He said, we can do that. So when I called the city of Dallas and they were like, we don't have any more money for that, but your name is going to be on the placard, which is like 50 feet away. And I'm like, that's not going to work for me. And I told him just like that, I'm like, that's not going to work for me. I said, it's important for me for my name to be on the sculpture. So I had to pay for it. And I'm like, I will gladly pay for it because it is important for my name to be on that sculpture and also for Othello's name to be on the sculpture too, because that's his quote on the back of that sculpture. And I didn't want anyone to take credit for it. I didn't want to take credit for his quote. So it was important for me to put his name using his signature, which I copied, but I got permission from May to carefully copy his signature to put on the signature plate of that sculpture, which was installed the day before the dedication. Yeah. And before this photo was taken the day of the dedication, but the sculpture was supposed to be installed back in August. But in August, when we went to install the sculpture, what I did not realize is that when United Fine Arts came to install the sculpture, they unpacked everything, and there's like, these bolts are too big. And I was like, what? And I say, well, can you just go to the hardware store down the street and get some that actually fit? And it's like, no. And I'm like, why not? I say, well, your engineer has to sign off on this. I'm like, what? And they said also the fabricator in California has to sign off on this. I'm like, what? They say yes, because if we were to put some different screws in here and it was to crack this glass, that's going to be a whole problem. So that set us back a whole month, because I immediately got on the phone and started talking to Steve Van Dyke, who owns KVO Industries in California, and say, look, Steve, I say, we have a whole problem here. I said, these screws, they don't work. So he said, well, I'll send you some in the mail. They should be there in like 2 or 3 days. I'll overnight them. Then I also had to get on the phone with my engineer and catch up with them and say, okay, this is the whole problem. What can we do? And they said, well, just do this, this, and this. I was like, okay. We had that fixed, but the problem was the installers, which is United Fine Art, had to get back on their schedule, which was a month later. So everything got recrated and got put back on the truck and waited for a month. But it shows you that things work for a reason, because the wall was not the right color. Also, the wall was the wrong color. We also had to stain the wall where it had an anti-graffiti finish on it, because people be tagging stuff and writing on things they're not supposed to be writing on, and we want to make it where you can clean it off easily and not where you have to get out there and repaint everything. You want it to be able to come off. So those are other things that I didn't think about that other people who were on my team thought about. So, well, you need to get some anti-graffiti stain to put on this, therefore to make cleanup easy. I'm like, okay. So that afforded us time to get that restained. So we fast forward to that's a full. If you have not gone to see the sculpture is located at the corner of Polk and Redbird Lane, going south. If you go straight out Polk, and it's going to be to your left, right there at the corner. And it's at Caddy Corner. The weird other thing with sculpture, I had to determine where the sculpture was going to be sitting and how it was going to face and all of that, which was weird. And they say, well, how many feet? And I'm like, I don't know, like right here, facing this way. They're like, but how many kilometers? I'm like, I don't know. And there were some powers that be, dignitaries that thought the sculpture was going to fall in the dry creek bed and all that kind of stuff. There's some corrosion that has been fixed years prior, but there were a whole lot of things that had to be considered in doing this sculpture. But this is the finished piece with the landscaping complete. And let's see if there's a back view. This is the plaque that has my name on that's like 50 feet away. They said, well, your name is going to be on that. When I told them that's not good enough for me. But yeah, but this is the day of the dedication. This is another engineering drawing to show you a scale drawing. This is the family. So they were trying to recreate, and Kelsey had just had another baby. So they're a family of 5 now, but this is the family, Riley, RP3, and also Kelsey and Bailey. And they're trying to recreate what they did for the sculpture, but that's the family. And Riley is a phenomenal artist. If y'all don't know, y'all need to get to know, because the DMA purchased one of his pieces this year. Yeah. He's like that big time. But yeah. And that's me with Riley and his family. This is when they were building the wall, because we had to get permits and all of that. And even on the site nest crate, I had to wear a hard hat and safety vest and all of that. But there's just a whole lot that goes into creating a public art sculpture. I would say that I was probably baptized by fire on that one. I was baptized completely by fire creating sculpture. But yeah, that's Unified Fine Art, and that's the wall before the sculpture when they were building it and all of that. But what I want to do is that I want to pause it here. I'm just going to let it just continue. Some things might be upside down, but I want to give Carl an opportunity to speak, because Carl was Othello's best friend, and he was with him at Cattle Lake when he suffered, was it a stroke?
Well, it wasn't Cowley. We were going to
Okay.
New Orleans towards some swamps.
Okay.
Right. But we did go to Cattle Lake quite a bit. My name is Carl Sidle, and I'm a resident of Dallas. I went to Booker T. Washington High School here in Dallas. Went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. And while I was there, I was around people like Stokely Carmichael, Cleveland Sellers, who started SNCC. Eventually, I ended up in Houston for a year. I met Mickey Leland, and then I ended up with a job at the post office, and that's when I met Othello. At that point in my life, I was very much aware about political things, but I hadn't really gotten involved with any form of art. And Othello and I kind of hit off, and he told me he was an artist, and so I was able to start. We just hit off with friends, started going to places that his life was surrounded by. And the first place that we ended up going they had a building over in front of a house in front of the Farrell Park before all of that you see is built there. And they had an organization called AAAW, Advancement of Artists and Writers. And there was a stage for the performing arts, was like Curtis King held for the performing, and then they had a gallery type of thing for art and all that. And I thought it would seem to be the center for most of the artists in that particular time. And with time, as I spend more time with him, he seemed to be the center here in Dallas. Like, you know, you have the sun, you got planets going around it. He was that. And eventually, he had a gallery over on Lancaster. And I would go by there many times, and he was the first black artist that I know of that actually had a gallery, a business venture. At that time, he was renting a place over on Lancaster, and most artists were still coming around our dollar, you know. And eventually, he ended up marrying May, and we were still working at the post office, and they were living in an apartment over off of in East Dallas, off of Pennsylvania, back off in that area there. And I would go by there sometime, and he had these paintings that were, at that time, very political, because our fellow was very concerned about our people and the struggle that we were going through. And that was the kind of thing that bonded the two of us together, because I had been up at Howard around, come in contact with people like Stokely and Cleveland Sellers that started Snake. And I also met Mickey Leland. So we just kind of hit off, and his first pieces of art were toward that type of direction. And it was his wife later on, and around about, I'd say about 1975, that brought up to him that, you know, so many of the black people did not recognize or did not want to just see this political side of things. So she suggested to him that he should start painting more, just showing our people as a simple type of environment, like maybe kids reading a book or playing baseball or riding a merry-go-round, or just simple type of old lady might be reading the Bible on the porch, the type of thing where you saw where the first time he did a painting of a woman getting her hair worked on, it was over here in Oak Cliff, and eventually he went to a beauty parlor where they were working on doing hair, and that painting that you see there. And it was because of his wife that he started doing just normal type of things. And eventually, when you sum up his works, an artist's work starts with the beginning, the middle, and then the end of it, of his works. He, after Hodari got shot, it hurt him so hard that his own people, in the sense of that his son had actually trusted the guy that shot him. He turned his back on him and he shot him in the back of the head. And it really hurt Arthur. So he started doing more landscape type of photography, which I had been doing quite a bit of it as we would go and look for people all in East Texas. We went down hill country, went into Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi. Eventually he went into South Carolina. He wanted to see where our people had first got off the boats when they come here and they was selling slaves in Charleston, South Carolina. He was there and eventually he took a trip to Egypt and Turkey and all that area. And he did paintings that came from there. So the one thing I really know about him is that whatever you see of his works, he was there. If he was in the swamps and he dealt with the mosquitoes and that, if you see a picture of the blue moss or something, he actually went to those places. He went to Egypt, he went all up into the places where the pyramids were built. He went Greece, he was all up in there where Western civilization started with the Greeks who got their knowledge from the Minoans, who at one time were Egyptians. He understood, especially since I was kind of the type of person that studied all this type of stuff, and we just merged together in that sense. But Othello really was the center of black art in the city, and he cared quite a bit about our people. He was not a type of man that was about just himself. It was always about doing something that went on the canvas and spoke to the needs of our people or portrayed us as just as normal as any other people on this planet. And it influenced me very heavily because I decided to pick up the camera. And I'm a self-taught photographer. I worked with Jesse at one time. With Art Garden, we would teach kids in the summer. And basically, I'm just trying to say about our people. That's what Othello was about. The bigger picture. And when I look at all these pictures, I think about the situation that we're in right now as a people. We think in terms of out, and the Bible tells you looking without for that which is within. As a people, and Othello knew this too, our people is suffering, and the suffering that would change for us, and when we learn that the I is inside of the we. And when you read the Bible, and you see all the great characters, Moses, Isaiah, all the prophets, and you go down to Jesus, there's one theme that runs through all of it. You have them, but you have the people that are following the leaders. There's always these battles that's going on with free will, but ultimately they follow and they become one. And both of us talked about the idea of the Lord our God is one. It's in that oneness that the people become strong. And when we learn that as a people and start working together, and recognize that you start out with three's a crowd, and it begins with a father, a mother, and a child. And when Jesus said you have to go into the kingdom as a child, because a child comes in the world with an open mind. And as we get older, we get more conservative because the body becomes much weaker, and we tend to hold on to the older thing, and the younger people are trying to figure out how to get into this world. And the problem that goes from one generation to another, you have to have some oneness in order to really educate a people. When you look at a system and you see true education, you have at the bottom floor, the first grade, you have the fundamental reading and writing, and it's throughout the whole system. And then you see the second, third, fourth, and everywhere you go, you see the same thing. That's how a people become educated and into oneness. And then you have to have the respect between the man and the woman, equally yoked. and the child comes up and all this missing in between, where you try to figure out, well, why these kids are like they are. You know, they become like that because we are separated within our own culture, and we have to become strong as any other culture. And when you look at what you call the Hebrew, or what is now the Ashkenazi Jews that were broken up in Babylon, and when the Roman Empire went north, and their bloodline is a little different because they integrated into the people of Japan. And when you see that and see what you see in Israel right now, all you're seeing is full circle, this circle of how people is oneness, the ills of what they're doing, the ills of the other side that's oppressed, and how you get out of all this. A strong people is become strength like the chain. The chain is no stronger than the weakest link. And it's defined not as the links, but as a chain because it's grouped together. So you say the Hebrew people, you say Afro-Americans, whatever you say, you describe of people, but they must have this oneness. And that's what he was painting about, and that's what we discussed all the time when we would go out. We were always talking and discussing about things like that. And that's basically it on my point of view.
I wonder, I painted a portrait of Carl when he came to the installation of the sculpture. He was trying to show me something on his phone, and Carl is so wise. I mean, I can sit at his feet and just listen to him all day because I learn something new every single time that I talk to Carl. And he was trying to show me something because he was, again, telling truths at the site when the sculpture was being installed. And I snapped this photo and I painted a painting of him, a portrait, and I titled it "The Wise Free Man," because Carl means free man. And then Carl, I'm not gonna say wise beyond his years because, but he is. He's just, I mean, like, I love this man. And he's such a sweetheart. I mean, like, and so soft spoken because you have to lean in. You saw I put the microphone right here. But I'm just so grateful for you. Just so incredibly grateful for you.
But I thought it was the gentleman, and he played such a major role in the person that you see here now. We're the sum total of all the people that we meet in life.
Yeah.
And some are closer than others. And I thought it was a major change in my life because I didn't start out to be a photographer or artist. I went to school to be really a physicist. You know, I became the prodigal son. I mean, but you know, I woke up and I'm trying to head back to my father's house. You know, the light. You know, the light is what it is. I mean, when the light opens up and you see the physical light, it's how you are able to move around. You know, it overcomes the darkness. You know, and there's a light that's within you. And when you dig deep within yourself, that's when you start understanding that really all the religions are talking about the same thing. When you start talking about comparative religion. And our fellow and I talked about all that. There was a religious school that's over there on Ross Avenue that we both visit, looking for material, you know. There's just a world in which when you dig within, you find that spirit where you're in the image of God, and you learn that the Christ is in you, There's a scripture in the Bible that says, let the mind that be in Jesus be in you. It doesn't say that you can't be that. We have to learn that too. That where we're in the image of God is inside of our consciousness if we learn how to really meditate. You have to get away from, like the Egyptian, you see that little eye? That's just that little part that say, I am called, I am Joe, that's the one to make the decision. But the pyramid, all the rest of it, that's the subconscious. That's the genius that's within all of us. And that's what the Greeks call the psychology, the psyche of what you call the soul. It's in all of us. And the soul is the part of the spirit that you have that is a part of what we call God, the angels, the archangels, all of them, every level. It's just another level of your state of being that you are progressing toward. And when you understand that, every choice you make, you realize you reap what you sow. The last thing on that tree is the fruit. And the fruit has the seed inside of it, and it's constantly multiplying. So when you make a decision, you have to realize that you reap what you sow. And that's how you're able to make yourself better.
Does anyone have any questions about anything? No questions? All right.
Okay, well,
I got one question. I'd like to say, yeah, how many of you are artists in the room?
I have a few.
Well, I say this here about art. Art is like what is new right now. So whatever you're doing as far as art, just keep doing it. Like our fellow said, I always would say this here, an artist never stops creating. That's the creative principle in you. Let there be light. You let light be on the earth. When you paint that, when you sculpture that, the 2 dimension that you're looking at, that's just 2 dimensions that's showing the 3 dimension. That's all up there in your head. And you've given the world ideas of where it can become better. So keep creating, never stop creating. And work together. We tried to get a guild together at one time. He had the AAA when I met him. Try to create a group where you can work together and do as we did at one time. We went all over the city doing exhibits. Even ended up down at the reunion hall doing an auction. And it was full of people. And you can do that and even more because the spirit is always growing. It's never getting shrinking, it's growing. It's expanding. This universe is continually expanding. The process, when you say I am, the verb is continually. And when you understand it, you're off to the races.